What is up, theology nerds? This is Trip, and you're listening to Homebrewed Christianity, where since the year of 2008, we've been bringing you interviews with scholars from the ivory tower. That's right, and putting them right into your earbuds. We don't want to think for you. We want to think with you. And today on the podcast are two friends of the pod, regular frequent guests, double doctors, James McGrath and Donna Bowman, and we are talking about the brand new Matrix film, Matrix Resurrections. It was a ton of fun to have this conversation. We did it initially live on the interwebs. It was streaming on the Homebrewed YouTube channel, on our Facebook page, on Twitter, and we even emailed everyone to invite them to join up. So we were interacting with all of those live listeners, but we really spent some time going over this brand new Matrix film, the fourth in the series, and we nerd out with our geeks out in intense ways. I hope you enjoy it. And whether or not, I guess I don't need to say this, but spoiler warning, if you haven't watched the movie and you're listening to a podcast of three religion scholars talking about the movie, then maybe you're not going to watch the movie. Or you want to have the super nerdiness blow your mind right before you. I don't know, but it's spoiler warnings. Okay, there we go. Now, before we jump in, I want to remind you that this Thursday, January 6th, we have another live stream. That's right. Adam Clark and Jeffrey Pugh are coming back on a year later. We had a previous theological reflection where we wrestled with January 6th and everything that was exposed in that day in America. And we're getting back together a year later, not just because it was the most popular podcast of the year, but because things have continued to reveal themselves. Ideas and things we suggested then, we've learned more about them. And so Adam Clark, Jeffrey Pugh coming back on. And you say to yourself, Trip, is this the Jeffrey C. Pugh who did the Bonhoeffer class with you last year? Yes, it is. And is this the Adam Clark who did the Black Theology class with you and is about to kick off the brand new class, Upsetting the Powers, Exploring the Theological Legacy of James Cone, father of Black Theology? And I'll say, yes, it is that Adam Clark. Well, then I guess you know now why I'm so excited to be having this conversation with both of them. I'm really looking forward to it. You can join live. It'll be on the podcast. But I definitely want you to consider joining Adam and I as we spend 6 weeks looking at the legacy of James Cone, father of Black Theology. Not only are Adam and I going to be reading James Cone, discussing it, wrestling with it with all of you that are members of the group, but each week we have a different special guest coming. Amazing people like Gary Dorian, Serene Jones, Kelly Brown Douglas, Andrea White, Robert Ellsberg. I mean, it's going to be a ton of fun. Consider joining. All you got to do is go to jamesconewasright.com. jamesconewasright.com. Join up. 6 weeks. It's donation-based, including zero. So hop on over. Now, friends. It is time. It is time to plug in to the Matrix with Donna Bowman and James McGrath. Enjoy. All right. Hello, everyone. This is Trip. And I have two of my friends, Donna Bowman, James McGrath, both scholars of religion, high-quality individuals. And on top of being academic nerds, they also engage in pop culture nerdery, both of whom have past relationship with Matrix, Neo, Trinity, and the fun. And we decided that, well, by we, I mean me, I decided I wanted to talk about the new Matrix movie and then started messaging my friends. And the first two people I messaged I wanted to talk about it with in public were these two, and they said yes. So all ye dear viewers and listeners and streamers and such, you are welcome, because this is going to be fun if I don't ruin it. Now, since this is the Matrix, and there's likely people that will end up listening to this that aren't Homebrewed Christianity regulars, who are like, no, I don't like listening to 90-minute discussions with academics about a book only a few of their friends read unless they were required to peer review it, then maybe we should kick off. We give each of you a chance both to say a bit about yourself as an academic and as a nerd, and maybe when you heard they were making this movie, what is that first love with Matrix when the first one came out that you said, oh, junk, they're doing a new one. Can they do it? Should they do it? I don't know what I'm going to think about this. I'm feeling really awkward. But also, I like talking about this. So James McGrath, we'll let James go first, then Donna, and then the next question we'll switch it around. So take it away, James.
Well, thank you, Trip. Thank you, Donna. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to have this conversation. I presume I'm asked to go first because I was all about The Matrix back when the trilogy was out. In fact, my blog, which is now Religion Prof, started its life as exploring our Matrix. It shows my lack of judgment that I didn't just scoop up Religion Prof or something like that. I could have probably been the Bible blog or something like that. I was into this early enough. But it's just as well because it didn't start out as a place where I talk about some of the things I talk about on there often now, biblical studies and those kinds of things I work on. It was a place to geek out and explore side interests, which quickly blossomed into areas of teaching and research. And The Matrix really did help inspire that. I think one of the things that made the original Matrix movies great, obviously there is a team of people in the latest movie who discuss what is it about the original Matrix. And so there's all that meta stuff going on. But this really was a pioneering effort at doing something philosophically deep with lots of symbolism in it through entertainment that could engage people who didn't care about the philosophy, right? And that's a really hard tightrope to walk, right? It's very easy to have engaging special effects and interesting story, or to do something philosophical that people like us would have a podcast about and nobody would tune in. But finding something that is both of those things together can be challenging. I think it also was really pioneering in the original movie at the time when it came out. It was one of the first ones that really was designed for you to go back, watch it again, stop the screen, look really closely. What is that book that Neo is pulling off the shelf? What's that title? Let me keep this paused and look that up. Oh, Jean Baudrillard, Simulacra and Simulations. What was that about? Oh, I get it now. For those viewers, as probably just a handful of, small number of viewers who didn't immediately get the reference to the book and know why it would be included in the movie. And so these multiple layers of symbolism, I think also the fact that the symbolism works on multiple levels. And so there's the question, are we living literally in a computer simulation, but also the Matrix as system, right? As society, as way of life. And so it was engaging and thoughtful on so many levels. It was deep and yet didn't require you to care about the depth in order to fall in love with it. And I think that really was what made The Matrix so great for me and led me to call my blog Exploring Our Matrix back when I started it.
Awesome, James. So Donna, James kind of mentioned it. He's a New Testament professor at Butler University. So for those that didn't catch that, now Donna is friend in part of the Open Relational Theology group in the Academy, into process philosophy, but has also been on the Matrix motorcycle and was in the DVD, which like the philosophy behind the Matrix DVD. Anyway, I would have a picture of me on the motorcycle behind me if I had been on this, but you are a bit more humble. So as Donna unmutes and kind of introduces herself.
Yeah, really excited to be here to talk about this. We were talking before the webinar about, getting in where we've been in the Matrix business or the Matrix adjacent discourse since the original trilogy came out. So I'm a a professor of interdisciplinary studies at an undergraduate honors program, University of Central Arkansas, the Norbert Shedler Honors College. And as such, I'm really privileged to get to teach in an interdisciplinary way. And that means I do use a lot of cultural products in my teaching. So I got into the matrix business because actually, of course, we were all intrigued by the first film. It was very clear that undergraduates like I have, these smart students who are interested in the world, were super turned on by this movie that had all of this intellectual stuff going on behind it, as well as being a great, technical achievement and a fun action movie at the same time, right? So my students were constantly talking to me about The Matrix. It was the movie of the moment. They wanted to know what I thought about it. But I didn't really get into doing scholarship about it until after the second movie came out. So I wrote an article for the Journal of Religion and Film about realized eschatology in the second movie. And really the thing that just flipped the switch for me in the second movie was, of course, when they're in Zion and they are celebrating embodiedness, right? And they have the big rave, and Trinity and Neo sneak off together and hook up. And that really, that was a much criticized scene as being silly, or over the top. People really felt like it was like the low point, maybe of the whole series. But to me, it struck me similar to some of the things in the Star Wars trilogies as being, just because it's depicted and even not like criticized at the moment, that doesn't mean that the filmmakers aren't critical of that moment. It seems completely celebratory, but it struck me as being something like, and I'd love to hear, James's take on this, struck me as something like the things that Paul criticizes the Corinthians about, for living as if they're in the post, living as if they're already not in the world anymore. Like all the laws are gone, and these are people celebrating being out of the matrix, but they haven't won the victory yet. And also this idea of like a communal celebration versus a private celebration. Like that seemed to me to be something the filmmakers were again subtly critiquing by having Neo and Trinity leave the community and go off and sort of celebrate embodiment privately. Like that's a tension to me. So I wrote that article. It got published, and then my friend Frances Flannery Daly, who's a Hebrew Bible scholar, had written an article on the Matrix and got asked to be on the Philosophy in the Matrix supplemental material on the DVD, and she suggested me to the producers, and they brought me out to the studio in California, and I was able to be on that as well. If you look at that supplemental material, it's probably on YouTube somewhere as well. I'm 6 months pregnant with my daughter, and I am just about to go to Korea. I went to California and then went to Korea for a conference. And so that whole event is so tied up for me with so many amazing memories. And I was so glad in the most recent movie that they talk about the motorcycle so much and that there's a big scene on the motorcycle, because again, that's something that is in the third movie, right? That's the iconic moment from the third movie. And it just like they embraced the whole trilogy, it seemed to me, in Resurrections. And that meant a lot to me as a person who embraced the second movie, the much maligned second movie. So that's my story.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So James, did you have a response? I saw you on mute. So
yes, I like a lot of the scenes that get maligned, including the rave, because I think it does highlight, there's just so much about it that it's celebratory. They are there's the embodiment, but then there's also, this is fascinating love-making scene, which is celebrating embodiment, and yet all these places for being plugged into the matrix are visible on their bodies as this is happening, and so there's depth and symbolism to that. The scene with the architect, and the fact that it's exploring the question of what does it mean to live a life of meaning and purpose in the world. What's real? What's valuable? Does it have to be real in order to be valuable? Is it focused on behavior, or is it focused on truth? And all these things that are of interest to philosophers, to theologians, scholars of religion. And I think in the mind of the filmmakers, as well as so many of us fans, should be of interest to people in general. And The Matrix helps us have conversations about those things with people who might not read some of the things that we read for pleasure or for our professional work, or both. So I'm a big fan of the entire original trilogy as well as of the new film. I'm also somebody who likes the Star Wars prequels. So I'm just one of those people who doesn't have to like every single narrative choice, script writing choice, director's choice in order to be deeply appreciative of storytelling across multiple films. But I genuinely enjoyed the Matrix trilogy. The whole thing. I've never been one who took some persuading or anything like that.
So the place to begin, I think, is I want to let each of you share a question that you think the new Matrix Resurrection is raising. One that, as scholars of religion, as people that are invested in the big stories that are shaping kind of popular culture discourse, like what's one of the questions that Matrix Resurrections raises that if we want to think about meaning, purpose, value, beauty, truth, goodness, justice, and all those kinds of things, this film gives us an opportunity to do. And yes, like this is not like we need to review a film. One of us is married to someone who does review films professionally. Donna, I'm much more on the James side of like, if I like that universe, like I love it a lot. And I can't expect any universe to be perfect after Middle Earth. So, it's, yeah. Anyway, I am anxious about September and Amazon's return to Middle Earth. But you could really reevaluate my relationship with Jeff Bezos. I mean, right now he's like the devil that flies a penis to space. But if Middle Earth is done well, I mean, that's like lowers his purgatory time. Anyway, so does either one of you want to go first on the Donna?
Sure. Yeah, I actually had some questions going in that I wondered if this movie would be about. And I think it did turn out to be about some of those questions. The main one that it turned out to be about really explicitly is a question that resonates with my evangelical upbringing as a Southern Baptist. And that was the question of what does it mean to be transformed in baptism, but then have to live a whole life? Like what comes after that transformation? And I think that's what this whole movie is about, right? I think it's about having to keep on living after the victory is won. And that's a very process, question. I think it's one of the things that process addresses really well, which my evangelical upbringing did not address very well. It didn't have many tools to address that. I think Catholicism has more tools to address that. I think that's something that came up in early Christianity, right? About when are you going to get baptized, and how are you going to try to stay sin free until you die, and how are you going to not mess this up, right? The question of what it would mean to mess it up. So I am really looking forward again to hearing James kind of expound on how he thinks the movie, the answers it gives to that, and how it explores that question.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Donna. Yeah. wasn't really thinking about Paul or baptism going into it. Of course, there's a lot of imagery of baptism, and of course the fact that baptism symbols death and resurrection, and the movies are called The Matrix Resurrect. The movie's called The Matrix Resurrections, and we do have scenes like the emerging from those pods and things like that, which are reminiscent, at least for those who practice full immersion, of somebody being baptized. If you're Catholic or Presbyterian, that scene might not actually recall that to you in quite the same way that it does for a Baptist or some others. But yeah, there's that line in the Matrix Resurrections. Stories never really end, do they? Right? And one of the things that is connected with the idea in that cutscene at the very end, that sort of narrative is dead, that the movie really explores storytelling, what it means to live in a story. And I think there's a very real sense in which that is part of what you're getting at, what it means to get away from a binary that evangelicalism tends to impose of saved versus lost, us versus them. And so one of the delightful things that the movie did was to say that, yes, Neo did make a difference. Neo and Trinity together made a difference, and that they got past one of the old binaries. And yet it's an ongoing story of having to resist binaries because it's not something that is definitively resolved, suggesting that we do reach eventually this lived happily forever after with no more story to tell moment. If there's no more story to tell, that's not a very happy ending in a sense, right? And yet that tends to be the way that some Christians, many Christians, not just evangelicals, but certainly conservative evangelicals, perhaps in particular, understand eschatology. You reach an end point, and then it is static, it is perfect from then on. And you can use imagery, but there isn't really a story anymore because there's no plot, there's no tension, there's nothing that can possibly go wrong. And yet in the book of Revelation, right, the gates are still open, there's still people outside, there are all these things in that story itself that push against that sort of eschatology. And so, yeah, I think the movie is helpful, and I think speaks not just to particular streams of religiosity, but a moment in society when the question of what is true, the question of how we live when we're perhaps not able to definitively answer that question of what is true, how we resist binaries, all of those things are crucial in there. And what we do if the sheeple, as the analyst calls them towards the end of the film, don't want some of the truth that some people who think they have deeper insight have to offer. What does it mean to remake the world as those who have insight in a way that benefits, challenges, but also accepts the fact that not everybody is going to read what we read, think about the things that we think about. So I found the movie very rich. And this is me just responding to Donna's point, which really got me thinking about all these things about the movie that I love and excited about, but think about them in a different sort of way. For me, one of the things I really liked
can I ask a question?
Lines,
I wanted to ask a follow-up real quick, because when Donna said that, it reminded me of this shift that happens, or maybe an ongoing debate among contemporary Protestant theologians that have recognized this. What do you do with salvation? What do you do with the Christ when they become absolutized to, say, a person and an event? And the Matrix Resurrections is kind of brilliant because the one ends up not being a person, but a path and a dyad, a relationship, and the event of salvation and such isn't a singular event. It's the form or the model of eventing. And so, yes, they happened. Yes, it changes everything that happens after it. But it's as much an invitation for deeper participation in the red pill existence, or whatever way you want to depict it, as it is just a solution to the right problem. And as long as you're looking for the one person or the singular event, then you actually misunderstand the kind of sinisterness that exists at the very heart of the Matrix, right? Like if the story you tell yourself, if Neo is the solution, is not a thick enough description of the ugliness of the system and how it feeds off people. You wouldn't have anticipated the analyst if he was the solution. And the analyst is even more duplicitous in ways that before you didn't get. And I hadn't thought about that till Donna said that. But yeah, I didn't want to forget that before you went on to the question you were going to say, James.
Donna, did you want to say something in response to that before I say anything? Because I knew Tripp had asked a question, but it also asked me to respond to you. And so I sort of responded to you, and I just want to make sure I did due diligence and at least offered to answer his original question.
Yeah, we're going to go down some serious rabbit holes, I think, because already there's a number of things spinning around. The thing Tripp just said, this idea about stories about saviors, right? I think one of the best undercutting or, I guess, opening up of those stories that I've seen recently is The Force Awakens. So we're going to go into Star Wars again. So at the end of The Force Awakens, and I think The Force Awakens is a fantastic Star Wars story, but spoiler alert, at the end of The Force Awakens, right, you see kids telling the story of the rebels, of Rey, of these other characters. And the implication that we're being told is it's not the characters that are going to save, it's the people who remember the stories and are inspired by the stories that are going to do that. But that implies that they're not. Again, the question is, who are we waiting for? I always go back to a conference I went to years ago, where I was shocked to hear a lot of people I respected, theologians I respected, answering the questions, the Obama question of, are we the ones we're waiting for? Answering that with, no, we're not. There's nothing we can do. And I was shocked by that, because I think the nature of, waiting for Superman. Now, that's a Flaming Lips reference. We're going to get all the nerd stuff in, right? Waiting for Superman to save us is part of, a huge issue we have in our society today. And this movie takes that on full force. The other thing that what you were talking about, James, brought to mind, and I had not connected this up, is that I've been in the business much more so than The Matrix of movies about the afterlife. So I was so excited to get to record a DVD special feature for the new Criterion edition of Defending Your Life, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. And they asked me to talk about what it means to make a movie about the afterlife. And the issue, which Tripp just brought up, is how do you keep any kind of tension or growth or story going when it's all over? And I think that's something that every movie that tries to be about the afterlife has to grapple with, and some do it well and some do it really badly. But are there stories there? And in a way, that's what this movie is. It's like, are there stories after? Do we have to reset everything? How do the people who are in that world understand whether there are still stories to be told?
Awesome.
Yeah. There's so much. I think about this in relation to my work. A lot of it in recent years is focused on historical figure of Jesus, and so I've done some things on that. I have a recent book on what Jesus learned from women, where I wrestled very much with the question of what does one do when the source material, right, the sort of bare facts, the snippets of information that historians have historically, pun intended, looked for, are not enough to really tell a story, right? On the one hand, if you say, well, we don't have enough, and so here are these tidbits, and it's a list, it's not an article, much less a book, and sorry, can't do more, but that's the nature of the material. Or do we dare to tell the story based on what we have and filling in things that are plausible, things that are likely, because otherwise we contribute to and perpetuate the silencing of these female characters in the early Christian movement. I'm going to be wrestling with the same thing as I work on another big book project that's coming up, hoping to devote next year to, on John the Baptist. But the movies as a whole, but in particular the most recent one, really do address that question of storytelling, right? And I saw an article just recently about how stories, can both work against and reinforce the sort of status quo binaries that we currently find ourselves in, because there's nothing like a story, an actual lived experience, and hearing about it to create empathy, right? To get people to finally connect with and view differently people that otherwise they had certain prejudices against, subscribe to certain stereotypes. But on the other hand, storytelling, time and again, does the us versus them. I'm the hero who will come in and will kill the enemies and wins by slaying the bad guys and things like that. And so for me, certainly as an expression of my own Christian faith, I really appreciate the Matrix trilogy, the Star Wars movies, anything that really features redemption rather than just riding off into the sunset. We've killed all the bad guys and they're gone, and we reign victorious. We ride into the sunset, heroic, whatever it is. And sometimes, I've said it before, controversially, that Star Wars in some ways does a better job than many versions of Christianity in being consistently about redemption, in as much as Darth Vader starts off as the classic villain and becomes the one who is redeemed and both saves and is saved by his son. His son's imperfections then become a focus in the later films. And yet so often you have these assumptions, such as when in systems where people think of the devil as a real personal being, that there's no hope for the devil and his angels. It's just once damned, always damned, as it were. And so stories that push at those boundaries, that recognize that how we tell stories matters, that a person is not static, right? Neo is going heavy on the blue pills throughout the first third or so of this movie. Is Trinity still Trinity, is asked in those terms and things like that. And what does it mean to respect somebody's choice? Like that there are a lot of moments that focus on respecting someone's choice, as well as some of the bad guys. I think we can still use that term, at least for the analyst. Not respecting people's choice and getting deserved kicks and punches and things as a result of some of the things that they say. So I like movies that complicate reality. And The Matrix, of course, does that by complicating the very nature of reality itself, but also complicates what it means to live in the world, live in any world, in ways that I think are important and get us thinking about important moral questions.
That's really good. So, Donna, did you want to respond?
Oh, gosh. We're going to talk for an hour on Tripp's initial question.
Well, things happen.
Boy, oh boy. So let me just talk about the last things you talked about being, and maybe this will get us into discussing particular elements of the movie. So going heavy on the blue pills. So one of the things I'm really curious about to hear about from both of y'all is something that my students are really attuned to and sensitive to, and that we're talking about a lot these days, which is mental health and how we handle the stress and anxiety and the dysfunctional parts of our neurophysiology. So I got a little worried about the critique of mental health treatment in this movie, and I don't know how seriously to take that. Of course, it's this fantasy world that but taking a pill to function in life is something we all know people in our lives, or maybe we do, or maybe people in our family do, or our students definitely do. How did y'all feel about? I got echoes of Prozac Nation in what you were what you were saying a second ago, James, and us oldsters remember that critique of like, if we have these fairly side effect free pharmaceuticals that help us be happier and more well adjusted, why not? Or are we losing something? That would be the that's what Prozac Nation proposed, is that we're losing something about our humanity by medicating ourselves to be happier. I don't know. How did y'all respond to that part of the movie?
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I'm so glad you asked that question, both because it gives me a chance to explore further what I was saying and clarify a bit how I see those things, but also because it's a great aspect of the movie. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one who wondered whether, during the initial part of Matrix Revolutions, is this going to be, it was all in his head? Is that where it's going to take this, right? And this is actually the real world, and it's like the whole thing was a dream, but in this case it was delusion, and was a bit worried about what that would mean for the original trilogy, but also what it would mean for this story. And I think the thing that really strikes me is that there is nobody who does without a pill in this movie, right? You are either taking the blue pill or you're taking the red pill. And that reminds me in some ways of the traditional sort of Christian rhetoric that you're always a slave, whether a slave to your own passions, a slave to culture, slave to idols, or slave to God. And that is a different form of service, and it can be experienced as liberating, but it is not in any sense a pure, unadulterated freedom, whatever that would mean. And of course, that I think speaks not only to the effort to destigmatize mental health in our time, but also the fact that freedom of a certain sort, imagined in a certain way, has been so elevated in American culture that it's harmful, toxic effects are being seen, and seen very blatantly and visibly in the present moment. And the illusion that any one individual can be completely, totally free without any limitations is just that. It's an illusion. And I don't need to tell two people who are in the world and of the world of process thought, even to a greater extent than I am, that in the very act of creating and in the existence of a world, God is not without limitations and with things of that sort. And so this idea that one can be infinitely, ultimately free disappears as soon as there is any other, right? And so if one person is maximally free, it infringes on the freedom of others. And so the American endeavor could only ever be an effort to maximize freedom for all and minimize the restrictions on people's freedoms. But that always ended at the point at which your use of freedom would take away freedoms from others. And so the movie gives us a chance to talk about mental health in important ways. I love that the movie really did make clear something that many people detected early on, which was that this was, there were elements of getting beyond, gender binaries, even in the casting and the way characters were depicted. And so, since the transition of the Wachowskis, that came to be front and center in a lot of ways. But people who are stigmatized for their gender identity, their sexuality in our society, struggle with mental health. And so that's not a separate topic, right? It's directly connected to this. But I think it ties in as well with a lot of these questions of morality, of religion, theology that we're thinking about today. So thank you for pushing back on that, because I certainly didn't want to take this in a direction in which it was just the people who are on the blue pills who are indicative of people with a mental health issue versus everybody else who's free and doesn't need pills, right? Everybody needs help to be mentally and spiritually healthy. And what form that takes will differ for different people. But the idea that we are completely free and independent, the Matrix films literally and metaphorically challenge that on so many levels.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that around that, I mean, I had that initial worry, and then after thinking about it And then watching it the second time, I realized that there's the question of the blue or red pill. And then there's the only other big drug is coffee, right? That's in the film. The analyst is at Starbucks essentially, but it's the
Simulate.
Yeah, Simulate. And then you have the kind of like hipster chic indie coffee house with the sign in it that something about like dreams and reality. Anyway, so you have that there, but what the coffee is this whole like stay awake so you can do what? Serve the capitalist machine. Capitalism emerges the same time we have coffee, and both sides are running on that. Right, so like in some sense, like that's the other drug in there. But when you think about if you don't take it as commentary about like the medicalization of things, but really the medicalization to fit you to a system that sucks on death, then I think is brilliant. And he's not like he's popping Prozac or something. He's eating blue pills, and then he's going to an analyst that tells him, "Here are your two options. You're either crazy, or we're going to figure this all out. And when we get done, you are going to keep playing your role and not believing the simulation even could exist. It's just a video game," right? So the whole picture of blue pill reality is one that's problematic. And what's fascinating to me, and I don't really know what to make of it, but while he's popping blue pills, Neo creates a new Morpheus in his blue pill life. And, he has this little bit of old school code, and it's there. He generates the character Morpheus, who then comes back to him in a slightly younger body and such. But I wonder if the medicalization bit is looking at us, right? Those of us that got totally turned on with the first Matrix and are like, "You're right. Our boomer parents told us this is how you succeed. This is what you do to do good." Like, and they go through all these things, and you're looking at it, and you go, "That's BS. I don't want to end up like them. We have this new hope. We're going to red pill this junk. We're going to get out, blah, 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 blah." And then us going back to this movie years later are like Neo, where we're sitting there and we're having to pop a lot of blue pills going, "Is this as good as we can do? Really? Maybe I can have this one little place where the hope of red pill existence goes. And maybe if this one little part of my life might spit back at me later and call me out because I know I'm BS. And I know like I'm having to pop all these pills and drink this coffee to play this game that ultimately sucking out my soul." The sad thing for Neo, right, and for Trinity or Tiffany is they both are haunted by the fact they know this isn't the only option. And so the blue pill to me is functioning as all the things that are necessary to keep us locked in our imaginations, that our social, cultural, political, economic structure is actually good for us. And this is the best we can do. So let's figure out how to fine-tune ourselves to it. And if it feels like it's death-dealing and problematic, take more drugs and see an analyst whose two options are you need to work harder, become more efficient, get better, or you're crazy. Because everything that's haunting you and scaring you and fearing you, those aren't real. Those aren't real. There are drugs for that. Right, so to me I had that response the first time I saw it, Donna, and then went back and go, I like this movie too much to allow that to be my interpretation. So that was my attempt at undoing it, and it's by it's about popping blue pills, not about someone who has a chemical issue that taking a medicine actually helps them relate to the real reality, not fit them for a death-dealing one.
I love that. The moment James said everybody's taking a pill, it's just which one you take. I think that really clicked for me. So now let me ask this question, because blue pill, red pill, binary has spawned a lot of pretty horrible stuff in our reality. Red pill has become a meme to mean waking up from having to take into account what women say. Just going back to James, what you're talking about with your book, right? Take the red pill because all of the stuff that, the mainstream culture is feeding you about diversity and about history and all that stuff is all fake. So that's been weaponized, that idea of the red pill. And so when that first was presented to me in Matrix Resurrection, I got, a shudder of, is this movie going to address the weaponization that has happened of its own format, its own metaphor? And of course, I think with the constant talk about binary, the choice is already made, binaries are, have to be transcended. I think it does address that head on. But I'd love to hear y'all talk about the other side of the pills, not the medicalization part, but about what it means to be awake, or, what it means to live in a blue pill or a red pill. Because there's a lot of people saying we're in red pill realities who are saying that, the reality that I'm trying to live and teach and bring into being is the problem.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So another thing that I feel really strongly about the whole franchise is the way that it did that. And I feel like one reason it doesn't perhaps do it quite as front and center, even though maybe it needed to because of our cultural moment in Resurrections, is because it did it quite effectively, for those who are fans of the second and third Matrix movie, by identifying the one, and the process by which the one is identified, wakes up, awakens others, is just another layer of control, right? That's part of how the system works. And so thinking that you have awoken to reality and now you are free is said very explicitly to be an illusion, right? And the challenge for Neo towards the end of the original trilogy is there another path, right? Can he, within this framework, since he's still constrained by some of what's going on, by the very existence of the Matrix, by all these various factors, is it possible to chart a course that doesn't just do what the one was supposed to do, which is to reset the system once it reaches that critical point of too many people who are not agreeing with what's going on, and so they wake up to another level of reality. One thing that I thought was left maybe almost a little too open-ended, although it needs to be open-ended, is the question of, the question has been there since the original movie. Once you can have a simulation, can you ever know you're in the real world, right? Can you ever know that your layer of reality is the real? And the most recent movie dealt with that in the sense that Morpheus, the new Morpheus, emerges from a subroutine, right? This modal that is part of the gaming platform, that is part of this simulation, that is part of, and so there's these multiple layers. But that was there already in the trilogy, in as much as when Neo, right, senses that something's different after connecting with the source and can stop the artificial intelligences, right, the machines. You shouldn't be able to do that, even if you've connected with the source. And so is this the real world, or is that indicative that the perception of reality is problematic? And so I like that there were echoes, at least in my mind, of Total Recall, particularly in this movie, that Resurrections kind of played with those things and didn't tie that up, but did at least bring that to the fore. And so I think there's a message throughout the franchise that is addressed very directly to those who would say, I took the red pill, I've woken up, I know, right? Because that was what Morpheus, and to some extent Neo, and many people thought by the end of the first movie. And the whole ongoing story is about problematizing that, is about challenging that. And so that connects with what I try to do as a historian and a scholar, because one of the things that feeds the desire for binaries that Resurrections gets at is that people like simplicity, right? And binaries are simple. And accepting life in the Matrix and just going along with the daily grind is simple. Or believing you've woken up and now you are one of the good guys in white hats fighting the bad guys in black hats is simple, but in a different way. And I think as scholars, But also, I think it's important for me as a Christian, as much as how I understand the Christian faith, pushing at those binaries, right? Recognizing that even if I've tried to align myself with the teaching of Jesus, I'm not, therefore, one of the good guys. I am deeply flawed, but I'm also, profoundly beautiful in the way that all human beings I understand to be beautiful. Obviously not in terms of my appearance, but hopefully inside in other ways. And so there's this pushing at binaries that I think the franchise actually does really well. But the risk is that a symbol within any movie, right, can be taken and weaponized, can be used in that way. And there's a discussion. Maybe one of you can get the exact wording of the quote. If you've rewatched it, maybe even more times than I have, about how that's what the Matrix does, right? It weaponizes, our ideas, our dreams, something like that. There is a bit of dialogue in Resurrections that says precisely that. And that's what the whole notion of Red Pill as a right-wing person who understands that there is a conspiracy, so, this kind of stuff, gets at. And it shows that actually that, the franchise can be useful in pushing back against that, I think.
Yeah, I'll just respond to that real quick because, again, I keep taking notes. Trip, I don't know what you want to talk about, but I've got a million topics here just from what you guys are saying. One of the things I always tell students that I love about the Bible is that even though different interests pick out the parts we're supposed to pay attention to, the rest of it is all still there, right? Efforts by various people throughout history to actually get rid of some parts of it that they found inconvenient have largely failed. So that's true of the memification of any piece of media. That if you take the meaning of Wolf of Wall Street to be, hey, isn't it fun to be a master of the universe? Well, once you go back and the movie's still there and is going to push back against that interpretation. So the idea that stories are rich and that we can always go back to them and that there's material there we can highlight anew for a new moment, I think is part of what you're talking about, James, and with going back to the original trilogy and how people who misunderstood or would prefer not to hear some of the messages, that doesn't erase what was actually there. And the other thing that what you're talking about brings to mind is, of course, one of the major things in philosophy and history, one of the major memes of ancient history that this brings up is the allegory of the cave, right? So the Matrix being kind of a cave and presenting to you these shadows on the walls, and then you get out and you can see the real world. And I think one of the big questions that comes out of that is how, there's got to be some kind of incompleteness theory of the Matrix where, and I really see that with the game in Resurrections. So in the game that Neo is programming, as you mentioned, he puts this subroutine in that has the potential to create a tension. So it's not a perfect, seamless experience. But also the way people respond to his game. They make out of his game what is meaningful to them. And so the idea that you can create a perfectly seamless experience that pacifies everyone ignores that human reality that people make meaning out of different parts of it than you intended. And you can't impose the whole complete layer of meaning on them because they're going to hear and understand and find significance in different parts of it. And so I was really moved by the parts of Resurrections where people found inspiration in the game, this matrix within a matrix. And yet they were still finding a thread to pull out that could potentially unravel the whole thing. And I think that really is true to the nature of our existence surrounded by media stories, memes, and meanings, is we're still generating them ourselves. That's our human nature.
That's really important.
I was just going to say, to avoid one more binary, even the analyst is not entirely bad and entirely wrong, right? I mean, I felt like there was a moment of sort of almost breaking the fourth wall, or breaking multiple walls, as the narrator behind the film and then the analyst and then us are sort of hearing directly, as there's that moment when it says, that's what artists do, right? Turning your own trauma into story. And there are genuinely risks in that. If we tell a story that is not open to being challenged by reality, and yet the analyst was using that very, that bit of truth in order to keep Neo from encountering certain things that would push at his reality and, challenge those boundaries. But it really is the case that, when we play video games, when we watch these films, it feeds very often that desire we have to be the hero of our own story, right? And that's what feeds a lot of the conspiracy theories and the other things, is people want to know the truth and to be one of the few people who's not being. And rarely do people think, when they do that conspiracy thinking might actually be something that is opening them to manipulation rather than freeing them from being manipulated. And so the Matrix films, I think, have that, at least that open-endedness, where there's a sort of, as you put it so perfectly, an incompleteness of the Matrix. And that, theologically is really what sort of the apophatic tradition, as we call it, is about, right? Recognizing that the ultimate reality that we refer to as God, by definition, has to transcend what our language can do justice to, what our thoughts can comprehend. And therefore, faith that acknowledges that has to be about recognizing humbly the limitations of our perspective and remaining open to being challenged because we are capable of being wrong in our own human frailty. And so there's a richness of theological symbolism to the Matrix films, among others, I think, as well.
Mm-hmm. So I want to make sure we get to a few topics. So I'll ask a question and then y'all can take it wherever you want. And this one's kind of related to what we were just talking about, but maybe taking a step back and thinking about what the film's helping. How is the film helping us reflect about our relationship to technology? Because the original Matrix film it was about how we use the internet in many ways, right? So you had to have a phone line, because back then everyone was hopping on AOL and was and then you were joining a chat. And in the new one, which is my favorite of how they updated Move, is now all you need is a mirror to go through things, right? Like, what a wonderful play. Like then we were all worried about the Matrix, but even the Matrix in some way has evolved because the story is helping us reflect about how the technology we make then recreates who we are as a species. And now every mirror, something that shows ourselves back, also is where you start to think of the phone and VR and AR and all those type of things. And because technologies come to form a different kind of web, I think, than anticipated since the original films. How technology is reflected on is different, and it plays a different role, all the way to right before there was that binary of like humans, real humans, and machines. And now we find out that at the end of the last film, that what happens is there's now a war between all the machines. You got red and blue machines or green machines, and they're shooting and they're having a battle. Why? Because what does the system need? It needs more fuel, and so we need more people. And then what are we going to do? And it has that battle. And then what do humans do? They want to taste strawberries, and how does Morpheus live outside of the Matrix as a digital composite of a a physical composite of a digital reality. And then there are scientists working with with computer algorithms to generate the taste of a strawberry retroactively. Like, how did it taste in the Matrix? And then how could we taste one now? Because we don't just want to have the sludge that they were all drinking with all the nutrients and minerals in it you needed in the original Matrix. That the shifting relationship of humans and technology is definitely no longer a firm binary, but just like the first movie was a commentary about where we were then, how do you see the questions around technology and what it means to be human getting asked again in a different time?
Since I see Donna shaking her head, I'll go ahead and say something. So I think the human versus machine binary is another one that's challenged. And that's one that certainly the original Star Wars trilogy didn't do so well on, right? With your Darth Vader, he's now more machine than man and things like that. Droids, if droids could think, none of us would be here and things like that. And you get restraining bolts on them and essentially slavery and things of that sort. But the Matrix movies, right, it was humans versus the machines. And to an extent, that parallels the original Star Wars trilogy, where you have a classic, hero versus villains movie, but then what follows problematizes that and goes deeper. But the Matrix, from the second and third films onward, really did problematize the humans versus machine thing, right? Zion could not exist without these machines that do things with air and water and provide heat and food and things of that sort. By the newest movie, humans and machines are working together and are accomplishing what they couldn't on their own. And there's this vibrant symbiosis. But for me, in many ways, a character I've loved ever since she first appeared in Revolution, if I'm not mistaken, is Sati, who I love that she reappeared in this movie, because she is the child of two synthients, right? Synthetic life forms, born simply out of their love, their desire to have a child. And it's not exactly human love, although it expresses itself in a related way. It's different. And so even in wanting AI either to be domesticated and just churn out things or be just like human intelligence, we sometimes are missing the fact that AI probably is going to be its own thing. And we often already do not understand exactly what it's doing and how its reasoning process works. And so I love that Sati reappeared in this movie and that she played this pivotal role. And that, she mentions that she prays, right? She actually uses that language. And they do all they can and says, now all we need is a miracle, right? And so the fact that this product of machine love, who is herself an artificial intelligence, is the one who prays and hopes for a miracle in this. I thought that nicely problematizes any human versus machine binary and any sense that machines must inherently either support our well-being or be detrimental to it. And that includes our spiritual well-being, our psychological well-being, other forms of well-being. Machines can benefit and can harm, just like human beings can benefit and can harm one another. And so it's not too surprising that our creations have that in common with their creators.
Wow. That's beautifully said, James. A scene that really encapsulates for me this blurring of the binary between humans and machines and calls back to kind of the horror of the original movie, which is that human beings have been turned into machines to fuel this system, is probably my husband's favorite scene in the movie. The motorcycle chase at the end, where the alert is sent out for everybody to dive out of their windows and turn themselves into missiles. And there's this beautiful scene where you actually see somebody wake up in bed and run towards the window, and the person they're in bed with is like, "What are you doing?" And it's a reminder of, again, the human life and construct that those people are living before that moment and in that moment. And you bringing up Star Wars again, James, reminds me of the dichotomy, the kind of switcheroo they do between droids and stormtroopers. And stormtroopers are people. They're just people behind a mask. And my favorite movie and my favorite moment in the original Star Wars is when the stormtroopers are talking to each other briefly and says, "What do you think's going on?" Probably just another drill. Hilarious little aside, but just a reminder that these are people in suits, and that we have machines, but they are much more sympathetic than the people who have put on the suit and allowed themselves to be dehumanized. And then, of course, in the sequel trilogy, the 7, 8, and 9 that we just had, we have beautiful moments right from the very beginning of stormtroopers taking off their helmets and becoming people again. And so that interplay between what really is a machine, there's these non-biological life forms now that are working, as you say, alongside of the human beings in Zion. And so we're not going to talk about people and machines or humans and machines. We're going to talk about sentience. We're going to talk about any kind of living thing that can live that kind of life and perform that kind of, not function in a system, but choose its own function. In that way, this movie really elevates and brings back to the fore the existentialist themes of the original trilogy, which I've always resonated most deeply with. Not just the idea of choice, but the idea of creating your own idea of a function and living that out, rather than having your function handed to you. And so that chilling thing of people diving out of the windows, of course, it's a comment on our times, right? Where, Twitter mobs can be mobilized, by a signal going out, and people can be formed into hordes and mobs that function like, machines. That's just one of my favorite moments. So I'm glad I got a chance to bring that up.
Yeah. And I think of that scene and the commentary on, you like frenzy mode, don't you? Right? Like that, the new way the technology functions, this is now a possibility. Before, Smith had to basically occupy all these people. Now, the way the technology functions, you don't have to. And recognizing, right, this Thursday's January 6th, you think of the way in which the not so red pill algorithmically mediated. What's the other line he uses? He says something. He says, "Desire and fear, baby. Let's give the people what they want." Underneath that, I think that's one of the other questions that the how we relate to technology raises. One that gets explored both in the mirroring kind of question, but also in the analyst, is what is the film asking us to do about our algorithmically mediated reality, where and how we don't even acknowledge how it's impacting us, right? That's not there are videos of people on January 6th last year going, "This is horrible, we have to draw a line," and then now they're like, it wasn't that big a deal, they were touristing, right? And I wonder if it's that kind of power gets explored in the film in a number of ways, one of which is where the analyst is like, look, everyone knows the concept of simulation now. The whole original story's a video game. Everyone knows the concept of simulation, and yet everyone believes that their world's the exception, right? And so the one that makes the most sense to me are the other people's story. But then you start to ask yourself, in what ways are the kind of fears and anxieties that we have culturally, getting hooked up with an algorithm to cultivate it within me so that what just seems as natural in just the world as it really is an interpretation where something else and some other desires are being cultivated in mind. And then all of a sudden, what do? I do what every perverse religion does, sacrifice yourself for it. And I go jumping out of a building, or I go this kind of thing. Like, what is, anyway, I started to go into preacher mode. This is what happens when I haven't preached in a while. But how do y'all see that question of algorithm and then the way in which our fears and desires get occupied by other intent without us being knowing or being transparent to ourselves?
Okay, there's a pause, so I will say something. I think just like life can be machine or human, the people who support, whether knowingly or not, the matrix, the system, as well as those who fight against it, none of them is purely good or purely evil. None of them knows the whole truth. And so the phrase from the movie that popped into my head as you were talking is, maybe this isn't the story we think it is. Right? The openness to a different story, one in which we're not at least always the hero, right? And yet which inspires us towards self-sacrifice even, right? There can be really toxic forms of self-sacrifice, especially when it's imposed and demanded by a religion, an ideology, a political system, whatever it is. But I think, from the perspective of Christian theology, I would say that freely offered, there is something that, if we all prioritize the well-being of others, the world would be transformed, right? And we wouldn't need people to come in and paint the sky with rainbows, as it were. And so I guess the question is, since all ideas get weaponized, nothing escapes algorithms, nothing bypasses technology, is how do we, if not weaponize, then utilize in a positive way the message of the Matrix movies to challenge those who think they've got the truth, and the truth is there is a liberal, child sacrificing, sex trafficking conspiracy in the halls of government and in a pizza house and every place else that one might find it, and challenge that and get people to recognize that maybe when they thought they took the red pill or did take the red pill, maybe we should grant them that, they awoke to something that was just another layer of control.
Okay, I think this is a great question, Trip, because I'm kind of, I guess, an optimist at heart, and I have a lot. We're in academia, and I don't think academicians are necessarily inclined to be sunny about the outlook of anything. We're always catastrophizing in academia, I think. And so I really appreciate, both you and James kind of asking that question about where we find that seam, where we find that thread, where we see a bit of the sky. Because that's always what I want to do is push back on the catastrophizing. So we've been talking a lot about the red pillars, and kind of alluding to the right wing use of that meme. But I also want to say that, the left has its own version of this. And if you since 2016 and then, again, really heavily in 2020, you get addicted to this feed, and your feed, if it's filled up with catastrophizing leftists about how, everything is screwed and we're completely screwed in all situations, there's nothing we can do. That's also the algorithm pacifying us, just with a different message. And I think a lot of us have the experience of just not, if we unplug from that a bit, how things suddenly change for us, how we can see a different set of things that can be important in our lives, not ignoring that these other things that are crises are important, but also knowing that even in the darkest times in humanity, people woke up and hugged their children and tried to do something worthwhile in the world. And I think, one of the questions about like the individual people who populate the system and the system, going back and forth between those layers, is who has power? Who has the power to do something? Who has the power to change something? And you may not have the power, this is existentialism again, right? But you may not have the power to change the conditions of your life, but you still have power over your response to those conditions. And you have power to find joy. And that's not to say that we shouldn't work to change horrible conditions of people's lives. But it's also to say that if we find ourselves unable to reach that lever at the moment, that doesn't render us powerless. So kind of that, like, we could just go deep into this, the original trilogy and this movie, and the notions of power and who has it and what it means. But I think there's a lot in this movie about, like, what do we do? What do we sign up for? What do we volunteer for that makes a difference on different levels of the systems? And I think there's algorithms do control a lot of what we do and what we see and what's available to us. But I don't think they're all coordinated. And so I think that, exposing ourselves to lots of different experiences is still a very simple and easy way to create tensions between the systems that rub up against each other, that create a scene through which we can see the light.
Yeah, Donna, I'm so glad you said that the Matrix franchise offers a critique and insights about ideology, not an ideology, whether right or left. I've seen people who have taught courses that are basically about critical thinking share things about the right that came across their feed because they've subscribed to or clicked enough times on something, and no fact checking. It's and it turns out not to be true. And so information bubbles are a serious issue. And again, that binary and the demonization, right, which and the dehumanization, which in some ways it's easier to do or to fly under the radar, and when you initially depict people doing it before challenging it, when you're dealing with artificial intelligences, right? So the squiddies, right, and the negative terminology for the artificial intelligences, the machines, toasters in Battlestar Galactica, right, the reboot. These epithets that rob people of their sort of personhood, right, if not their humanity. And so I think that's what Christians ought to be bringing to things, not that we say, as somebody famously said, well, there are good people on both sides or things like that, right? Sometimes we do need to align ourselves. We have aims we need to work towards. But the thing that has to define us as Christians is that we do so in a way that recognizes the humanity of the other, right? And those who defend their own tribe or family or person or whatever, their nation, and are willing to sacrifice other nations, other people, other lives in order to safeguard their well-being, think of themselves as doing something heroic. They think of themselves as acting in love, right? Care for others. It's others who are like them. And in the Matrix franchise, we had factions on both sides, right? Machines that would happily keep humans enslaved in order to benefit their own society. Humans that would wipe out all the machines in order to achieve this ideal of freedom. And the message at the end is we can actually be better together. Right? We would have probably been better together if we hadn't fought war that led to the devastation of the planet. But there's still a chance, even when things have taken a terrible turn, to envisage a future that redefines the meaning as Bugs puts it at one point, changes the meaning of our side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I really like the Bugs character. If they keep doing stuff with Matrix, I hope she's featured because she was pretty awesome. And could Trinity just be Trinity for the whole movie? Because it took so long. And then once Trinity showed up, she was so hardcore. I was like, I wanted more of that. And less John Wick, Neo, more other Neo. Okay, so I have one more question I want to ask, and then let both of you have any closing thoughts and stuff. And I'm looking through my list of them. So, okay, so you can pick. Here we go. I'll just say them both, and you can pick whichever one you want to go. Whichever one Donna responds to is the one we're going to discuss. So, one of them is the human-ish city, since it no longer is just human, is no longer Zion. This is my question thinking about the realized eschatology bit up front. It's now Io. And Io, and I don't know if this is true, but I just assume it is because since it's Wachowski. Io is Zeus's lover who was turned into a cow to hide his lover from Hera, who was super jealous. Then she finds her, keeps her a cow, and then creates a fly to permanently chase Io, who's now a cow, and annoy her forever. Like when you think about the previous framing of, Zion and like, we're going to be human, and then who's in charge of Zion but Morpheus, and then you missed the years of warring machines and all that kind of stuff, and then now they are kind of cohabitating a planet but always having to escape them kind of thing, and you have Io. How is that envisioning the flourishing, the nature of human flourishing? And the other question is, what do you think the film's trying to do with its kind of meta commentary about reboot culture, the IP-ification of all things, like the nostalgia, enough nostalgia that the three of us said before I'd even seen the movie, you're like, yeah, we're going to talk about it because it's the Matrix. And you've already, we've already mentioned other IPs that we all like. We're like, yeah, Star Wars, or like Lord of the Rings, or Star Trek, all that kind of stuff. Either way, we can go to either one, but those are two topics we haven't touched on at all that I came into it wanting to talk to both of you about.
Okay, we can't do either one because that's a binary choice.
Oh,
so
well.
We're gonna do both. But I think the first one about Io maybe is a little less rich. I have some thoughts, but maybe I don't know. It was so funny when they said Io, and I was like, oh, they just lopped the ends off, right? They lopped off the Z and the N. So that's interesting. But Io itself, I0, 1, 0, a binary, power on, power off, right? That's the symbolism we have on our machines. So, that was like, I think the idea is that we got to keep collapsing it until there's nothing, there's no name for it. Maybe, I don't know. We just keep squeezing it down. But on the second one, that is very interesting to me. I think there's a declaration here that IP is not constrained or limited to its corporate function. The corporate function of IP is to make money for the stockholders of Warner Brothers, whoever owns that these days, or Disney, right? If we're talking about Star Wars. That's the function of IP, is just to keep generating that money. And so, we're keep plugging, we put them back in the pod and we plug in the thing and we power the whole thing up and it goes, right? And that's the negative side of IP. But to go back into this universe like Lana Wachowski did and to say, there's something here that's going to feed and nourish me if I go back to it, that Keanu Reeves wants to go back into this character because there's something that feeds and nourishes him, that the whole cast and crew refused to abandon the movie after it was shut down because of COVID, because they thought there was something there that could be. I don't think it's just about making money. everything we've been talking about on this podcast so far is about how even though there's Jonathan Groff, Agent Smith, thinking that that's what the Matrix game is about, his perspective is not the only perspective that matters. He is not controlling what everybody else gets to make out of the Matrix game or the Matrix movie. And so on Warner Brothers spreadsheet, it's how much money did it make and is there interest in a sequel and all of the stuff about IP. But for us, we don't have to care about those things. Those things do shape the product we get, but it's a TARDIS. It is bigger on the inside, right? And so when we go into that story, it becomes something we get to embrace and make meaning out of, and that can change our lives. And that's not going to appear on anybody's spreadsheet. But IP changes people's lives every day. And if you make something that is rich enough and complex enough, then it's going to live on in the lives of the people that it changed. And people keep telling more stories about it. So I'll give you one example and then I'll let James speak on this. Over the last year, one of my children got heavily into Blaseball. I don't know whether any of you are aware of Blaseball, but Blaseball is an online baseball simulation / horror game, which simulates baseball games with simulated players and invites people who are watching. It's what's called an idle game, right? You just kind of watch it. It plays itself. But it invites you to be a fan of a team and then, join with other fans on a Discord. And what has happened with this game is that it's become this incredibly vibrant community that's making art and music and is sponsoring anti-capitalist endeavors and training people to set up unions at their workplace. And this wild explosion of creativity and activity in the real world that came out of people being interested in a simulation. And I think anything that is rich enough, even unintended by its creators, has that power to leave that realm of IP and to create change in the real world.
Oh, thank you, Donna.
Yeah, I'm so glad that Donna said we're going to not go the binary route, because there was something good about both, something to be said about both. So my mind went to, because another area that I work on is sort of the Bible and music, sort of religion and music. And of course, there are these songwriters, groups, bands that have the persona of being rebels against the system, and yet are making all this money from the system, right? And the Matrix films are making lots of money from the system, even as they are critiquing. And so there's no absolute binary either between being part of the system and challenging the system, right? There's no way to destabilize the Matrix without going into the Matrix, being plugged into it oneself. And so I don't think, I think there's room for sort of the critique of the capitalist endeavor with intellectual property and things of that sort. And that if there's a risk that narrative will be dead, it's because narrative gets spun on so long in the interest of making more money from a franchise, right? Until there's nothing left to do but the cat tricks. There's room to, we can't get away from systems, right? And I think that's one of the big risks, right, with the whole kind of imagery of the red pill, or the notion of the Christian gospel, that now we have the truth, we have no, we're not part of a system, this is not something human created, there are no flaws, there's no room for improvement, there's no ongoing process. And so both within the within world reality that's depicted with its multiple layers of reality and artificial reality, but also the franchise itself gets at that. Just one quick thought about I.O. The one thing that came to my mind was that in order to work towards a better world, I think, and to work towards being better people, we have to be committed to being perpetually annoyed, right? We have to resign ourselves to imperfection. And while that's not really the meaning of that myth, it seems that there were things that could have been viewed as theoretically better for humans or for machines that would have involved ongoing conflict that probably would have made everything worse for everyone. And accepting the hard work of trying to create strawberries and of figuring out how to improve things involved some sacrifices of some goals and some ideals. It had some costs. And so I think that the gospel calls us to accept the fly, as it were, if you want to speak in that mythical language.
Great. Yeah, I didn't even think of the Zion without the Z in the end part. See, that's what happens after the 10th viewing. Then you think of more obvious things. But some of us read a lot of Greek mythology with their teenager during lockdown. So anyway, I want to give you both the chance to have any closing thoughts, responses, and such. But while you're gathering what that thought is, I just wanted to thank you both for this. It's been tons of fun. Now that you've mentioned multiple IPs that you like talking about, I imagine I'll try to get you to do this again. The one thing that pops in my mind about the film itself and then seeing the responses that I haven't quite figured out is I wonder what the people who really liked the first one and were disappointed wanted. What they were looking for, because like you can't blow people's minds with technology again. That happens. The story got more and more complex, and I think a lot of people maybe like the simplicity of the first Matrix film. The second and third kind of move on. But like when I think about the distance we've traveled as a culture, and the Matrix has always had this kind of commentary on our culture, like to get a film that's as optimistic and revolutionary and stuff as the Matrix doesn't fit the moment. Like part of what it needs to do is not give us a choice and like we can be different kind of thing, but to enter into this like big malaise where we all kind of feel stuck in a shitty situation and like then give us back the situation where there's possibility in it where it wasn't before. And I think that for me, that shows up at that's why it's resurrections, right? But like in the very beginning, unlike it all coming down, you also see like some of the code coming up. And so like from the moment I saw that, I knew I was going to like it, but I'm also like predisposed to enjoy things I really like if it's films, not if it's sports, right? So even though LeBron has dominated the last 4 games and things, the Lakers are just now 500 and it's utterly depressing. And I just quit halfway through games and get upset. But with films, TV, Boba Fett, like I was like, oh yeah, it's Boba Fett. It's a Sarlacc pit. And then people, that was so predictable. I'm like, yeah, but if they didn't do that, I'd been so mad. You realize that? Anyway, so but like I'd love to hear your final thoughts, Dave, because for me, this film made me have fun talking with you, and that's what The Matrix did the first time. Is it got a bunch of people that all the nerds all of a sudden could talk about the things they care about with their friends who did not read Plato to get the cave allegory, never read Baudrillard. And you're like, do you want to know? Remember that guy I was talking about when you said you were going to Disneyland and how there's like the perfect France and it's not in France? You remember? And they're like, no, Trip, I don't. Anyway, I thought the film for me was a conversation starter with lots of people. Totally enjoyed getting to talk to you. So I will let James give final thoughts and then Donna, and then we can wrap up and such.
I'll just make my final thought. The thing that I saw, because my son, who watched the movie with me when I first saw it in the theater, said, "There's a final scene after the credits. We should stay." He's also a pursuing a life in film scoring, and so we are always happy to stay and listen to the music anyway. But right before that final cut scene, which on its own I might not have thought was worth the wait, but it was worth the wait to see that right at the very end, right, Lana Wachowski had put, for Mom and Dad, love is the genesis of everything. And so that's my final thought, is not from me, but from her.
Well, that's beautiful. I was worried about this movie. I was worried about going back into this world. I was worried about the constant reboot culture we're in. I was worried about telling the same stories again and again. I was worried about how they would create a new tension to solve, about whether we have to go back to square one. And then the movie just dove right into that worry by taking me back to what looked like square one, right? And I think the moment that I realized that we weren't there, that, that this movie is super aware of what it's, where it stands and what the opportunity is to tell a story for this moment, was when you see actually Tiffany with the children and husband, and you think, okay, we all are at different places in our lives than we were when The Matrix came out. And not only the culture has moved on, but we have. When something my students don't realize is how much your values and drives are going to change throughout your life, that there are stages of your life, and that everything changes when you go through those different stages. And so to go back to a story that continues to have power and meaning for us, but to tell it at a different stage of life and a different stage of history, it was courageous, and I responded to that courage all along the way. I really liked this movie, really loved it, and can't wait to see it again. And so my final thought is about a philosopher that I don't know if it has been brought up in discussion of The Matrix yet, and that's Feuerbach. So Feuerbach has been somebody that has been a touchstone for me for a long time. And a lot of people know Feuerbach only through kind of the Marx reference of inverting Feuerbach, right? But here I think there's a beautiful exploration of another kind of reversal of Feuerbach. Feuerbach says we take our own reality and we, project it into another realm, and then we tell that story back to ourselves to understand ourselves, right? And I think we turn our actual reality into a fable and kind of enclose it within our reality, kind of close it off, and that way we can pretend it doesn't matter. And I think that the lesson that Feuerbach has is that it's always going to matter. All those projections, those mirrors, right? They're always got new things to show us. That's my final thought.
Jeez, come on, Donna. Dropping that on the way out the door? That's like trying to invite everyone back in. So that's so good. All right. But I'm not surprised. Donna, she responded to my last book, to this whole exploration of the demonic in relationship to and it was like by far the most disturbing response I received. So I'm not surprised that the alternative inversion of Feuerbach, that's very intriguing. So thank you both for hanging out and joining, everyone that's been a part of this live. Thank you. Thank you, everyone on here and Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and such. If you miss parts of it, it'll all be on the podcast later. If you enjoy the live thing on Thursday, Adam Clark and Jeffrey Pugh and I are looking at a year after January 6th. Last year, after January 6th, we did a live podcast thing that then, within a few weeks had been downloaded like 116,000 times, which for Homebrewed is very big. And people asked to do it again. So we decided to think theologically about the past year and the things that were kind of revealed there, and continue to wrestle wrestle with. That'd be on Thursday. You can join live or listen on the podcast. But if you have other IP you want me to try to lure Donna and James into talking about, feel free, because next time we'll have to get the inversion of Fauerbach at the front, because now I want to talk about it. But thank you all for being here, and we will see you later.